Good evening. I hereby call this regular meeting of the Natchitoches NISD Board of Trustees to order. Let the record show that a quorum is present, and notice this meeting was legally posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Act. Please remember, the items do not have to be taken in order shown on the agenda, and please join us in turning off your cell phones to silent mode. The board will now conduct an executive closed session, discuss the items posted on our agenda pursuant to the following provisions of the Texas Open Meeting Act as allowed by Texas Government Code sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, 551.0821, and 551.129. No voting will take place in a closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in open session. It is now 5:01. Thank you. The board is now reconvening in open session at 5:24 p.m. The time is 5:24 p.m. on Thursday, August 15th, 2019. And the Board of Trustees of Nacogdoches Independent School District is meeting to hear a Level 3 parent complaint brought by parent Ms. Michelle Peck. The hearing is being held in open session at the request of Mrs. Peck, pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.0821. A quorum of the board is present. For the record, the following board members are in attendance: James Urban, Mindy Winslow, James Matoya, Dr. Tyrell Groma.
I recluse myself.
Thank you. Fashi Nurman and Pam Fitch. My name is G.W. Neal, Board President. I'll be presiding over tonight's hearing. This grievance is being brought by Ms. Michelle Peck. In attendance today, presenting on behalf of the administration is Mr. Michael Martin, Assistant Superintendent, and Mr. Steve Autry, Mike Mosley Middle School Principal. Also present, Attorney Kelly Korcheski. The details of the grievances are in the record before the trustees. At this time, I would like Ms. Korcheski to provide an overview and direction to the board regarding our role this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Good evening, board members. As indicated by Mr. Neal, a copy of the record, which looks like this document, should be before you. A copy of the record has also been provided to Mr. Martin, Mr. Autry, and Ms. Peck. I have an additional copy. Mr. Peck, would you like an additional copy as well?
I think we're fine on
You okay?
Thank
All
you,
right. Okay. The record is actually numbered in the bottom right-hand corner, numbers 1 through 56. So as each of the parties refer to different documents this evening, it might be beneficial to note the page number so that the board members can follow along with you and be able to consider those as you discuss those documents. Within the original complaint document, it's page 1 of 2, filed on board policy F&G local exhibit form. There you'll see that Mrs. Peck has complained that her daughter was permitted by district staff to leave campus alone without parental consent and inconsistent with the car rider election made by the parents on the Mike Moses Middle School enrollment paperwork. The remedy requested is that the administration inform parents in writing in their home language that Mike Moses Middle School does not have a duty of care for children while they are on campus. Essentially, what Ms. Peck is asking is that the school let parents know that the paperwork that caregivers sign designating the protections for the way their children leave campus is not upheld through campus procedures or district policies. Board members, recall that you are a policy-making body only. As such, the board's role tonight in this level 3 process is to review the decision made at level 2 and to determine if there has been a violation of law or policy. Remember that the board is not a fact finder in this proceeding. The facts have already been established by the administrators in the lower level decisions. Because this is an appeal, the parties are asked and will be directed by Mr. Neal that they may only present argument and evidence that was considered as a component in the level 1 process. The board's focus, therefore, should remain on that information as well. As Mr. Neal indicated, tonight's hearing is being held in open meeting. That is at the request of the parents. While Mrs. Peck's child will necessarily be discussed in some format, it should only be in relation to the events of March 26th and only if required to understand the record. No other students may be discussed. This applies to presentation by the parties as well as questions by the board members. Further, the board will not entertain any criticism of district employees in open meeting. Mr. Neal, you may now review the procedures for the hearing.
I will now explain the procedures, to be followed this evening. Ms. Peck, as agreement, you will be allowed 10 minutes to make a presentation, which conclude the administration will allow the same amount of time to respond. Ms. Peck, you'll be allowed up to 5 additional minutes for rebuttal, if any. Consistent with policy, this hearing is being tape recorded. Therefore, the following rules will be observed and strictly enforced. All participants are to speak loudly and clearly as to be properly recorded. Only one person talks at a time, no interruptions. Everyone, including audience members, must conduct themselves with common courtesy and respect for the rights of others. Board members sit as a panel of judges are not to be questioned by representatives of parties. Are there any questions regarding the hearing procedure?
I do have a few questions. First of all, in the letter we received from Mr. Martin dated August 7th, it said we'd be allowed approximately 15 minutes. This is on page 56 of your board packet, to present an argument, after which the administration will be provided the same amount of time to respond. In your guidelines, President Neal, you just mentioned 10 minutes with 5 minutes of rebuttal. That's inconsistent with the documentation we received from Mr. Martin in this August 7th letter.
Yes, we're referring to that. A total of 15 minutes, 10 for the presentation and 5 for your rebuttal.
Right. What I'm saying is this letter specifically says 15 minutes. It doesn't divide it by rebuttal and presentation. And so our presentation may exceed 10 minutes because according to this documentation, we had 15 minutes in total to present.
Okay, we'll proceed that way.
I also have one more question,
Yes.
President Neal. In her remarks, Ms. Karcheski referred to lower level decisions and lower level hearings. I want to state, and I will state several times tonight, there was no lower level hearing. So any documentation that suggests that there was a lower level hearing or a decision for a hearing that never occurred is inconsistent with board policy.
Just say noted.
Noted.
Thanks.
Okay. Ms. Peck, I remind you that we're in an open meeting. As indicated by Ms. Korczewski, you may discuss your child, but no other. Further, you may only address the March 26th incident, making the basis of your complaint. Any other information or concerns here must be reserved for another forum and will be ruled out of order. Similarly, any matter concerning to the filing of level 1 complaint is not properly before the board and improper for the board's consideration. Finally, you are to limit your remarks to the policy issue raised in level 1 complaint and may not criticize a district employee. To maintain the integrity of the complaint process, I will interrupt you should you deviate from the rules. Mrs. Peck, you're ready to proceed?
Yes, I am.
You may proceed, and I remind you that you have a maximum of time needed as you need it. Mrs. Anderson will maintain the time.
Do I set the timer for 10 or 15 minutes?
I would recommend that you set it for 10, and then if Ms. Peck needs additional time, then she can use it, but that will be taken away from the rebuttal.
Thank you.
Ms. Peck?
Good afternoon, President Neal and our Board of Trustees. My name is Michelle Peck, and this is my husband, Adam Peck. Thank you for agreeing to hear this Level 3 appeal. We believe this is the proper space for examining our complaint because it deals specifically with procedural applications of your board policy. Tuesday, March 26th, our daughter was released from Mike Moses during school hours and permitted by district staff to leave campus alone without our consent. At least 3 teachers knew of Josie's intent to go somewhere after school, and 2 teachers said they watched her leave. Paperwork on file designates our daughter as a car rider, and we were not notified by campus personnel when she set off on foot. Our babysitter, Amy Pacino, reports that she was missing. Amy and our son arrived according to the published campus release time to pick up our daughter, but when she was told that Josie had left, she acted responsibly and immediately notified me about Josie's disappearance. My husband and I could not reach campus staff through phone or email. Luckily, our daughter was found and was unharmed, and for that we are grateful. However, campus-level procedures create a gap in care that risks our daughter's safety. When she went missing, we could not reach the campus. Campus-level leave procedures seem to directly conflict with district policy and are not published for parents. We need your help to prevent incidents like this from occurring in the future. Again, our child, it's not stipulated, was designated as a car rider as per those enrollment forms, and the paperwork creates an impression that Mike Moses Middle School staff will ensure that children are released to caregivers designated by parents. Language in the 2018-19 Student Handbook supports this impression, specifically stating on pages 75 to 76, state rules require that parental consent be obtained before any student is allowed to leave campus for any part of the school day. For students in elementary and middle school, a parent or otherwise authorized adult must come to the office and sign a student out. Through the course of our investigation and attempts to solve this issue at a campus level, we learned that Josie, along with all other car riders and students who walked home from campus, was released at 3:46 p.m. This information is documented, and if you need me to signpost, I apologize. I just received this document tonight, but I'm happy to look for it outside of that time. She was released 4 minutes before the published campus bell schedule and documented before the campus bell schedule and end of school day procedures. This procedure is not published and has not been communicated to these parents. Had we known our child was released early, we would have provided coverage for that gap in care that these procedures create. This campus procedure is inconsistent with approved board policy. It leads to lost instruction time that adds up to more than 11 hours a year, and in the case of our daughter, it's one of several flaws in campus operations that led to a lost child. Mike Moses Middle School Principal Mr. Autry wrote, "We don't check each student to identify their method of leaving campus daily. It is uncommon for middle schools to track how each student leaves campus on a daily basis. I filed a level 1 complaint on April 1st, 2019. I never received a hearing. After pressing for Mr. Autry to respond to my complaint, I received an email on May 28, 2019. I never received a hearing. I never received a decision for my level 1 complaint. That's when I submitted a level 2 complaint. Mr. Martin wrote in his level 2 decision, there's currently no text within the student handbook or elsewhere guaranteeing student safety, nor does state law or policy provide for such a guarantee. We disagree with the level 2 decision, and we're here today with this level 3 complaint because we think if the procedures supported by Mr. Autry and Mr. Martin are supported by board policy, parents should receive explicit communication that the district does not reference the student leave preferences that caregivers file with the campus, including information pertaining to how or with whom a child should be allowed to leave."
So let me pick up there. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity for us to be heard tonight. And in particular, our intention is not to be adversarial or confrontational, but we just believe that if in good faith we bring these issues to you, you'll want to resolve them as badly as we do. I want to, for the sake of simplicity, break down our complaint into 3 issues. The first is that some flaws in the system that Michelle just identified allowed our daughter to leave campus in a way we didn't approve. And again, our concern is that any other child might find themselves in the same situation. The second is the lack of due process in the complaint and the lack of procedural fairness, which I believe that should be rectified. And the lack of transparency in the district's operating procedures with regard to our case. And then finally, we identified a breakdown in campus communication systems that, while we believe have been since rectified, we just want to make sure that we put on the record and make sure the board is aware of. I'll actually start with that issue first because it's the simplest to resolve. From the point that we became aware that our daughter was missing, we began frantically trying to contact any individuals at Mike Moses Middle School. First, Michelle received the voicemail in the office. Our understanding is that that phone is monitored until 4:25 each day, and that may be generally how it operates, but on that day, we were going straight to voicemail. So in addition, Michelle began trying to email Mr. Autry, and through no fault of his own, the email system was not working. We have documented bounce backs on our emails, so no way to reach them that way. So while Michelle began driving towards the school, I started trying to contact Mike Moses by phone. I got voicemail, and so I tried pushing 0. Sometimes that will get you transferred to someone else at the institution. And that actually transferred me here to the district support center, where I was pretty chagrined that the individual I was speaking to did not even know who Mr. Autry was. Kept asking me if I knew, or if I meant Mrs. Autry, which obviously was concerning to me. honestly, I didn't know his wife worked at the school at that time, so there'd be no way I could even make that up. So we just want to make sure that, again, Mr. Martin has assured us that this has been resolved, and I believe that to be the case, but we wanted to make sure to raise that here. I also want to commend Mr. Autry because when I brought my concerns to him immediately the next day, he took them seriously, he acted quickly, and tried to help us find a solution. The problem is that that solution has not been as effective as we might like it to be. And in addition, we feel like other students may be affected if this process isn't improved. Josie is a child with a number of special needs. Some of those make her particularly vulnerable to predators. Our psychiatrist has made a very strong point with Josie that she is a child who could be very easily exploited. So the thought of her being unobserved for any period of time causes us a great deal of fear. And so we really have worked with the campus staff to try to develop strategies as a team to keep her safe, but we really count on Mike Moses to help us with that. Josie's on file as a car rider, and so to us, we felt like that implied that that Mike Moses would ensure that our wishes were followed, and we were really disturbed to find out that wasn't the case. So finally, at least 3 employees, whom I won't name personally, knew that Josie intended to go someplace else after class. She told them explicitly. As I have mentioned previously, Josie has never had a thought she shared out loud that she did not eventually act upon. And so we really wish that someone would have been able to reach out to us and give us some warning of her intention to leave school, or told us when we were able to get in contact.
When I met with Mr. Martin for the level 2 hearing, there were a lot of inaccuracies in the documentation that he provided, and I attempted to set the record straight with evidence that I had provided. Nevertheless, many of those persisted and are included in his level 2 decision letter that each of you have. He never provided any evidence of his investigation. Like I said, this is the first time I've received this packet, which contains some things I've never seen. And I've provided verifiable documents that clash specifically with things that he said. In his decision, he wrote that those in charge of supervising students that day acted appropriately in that no one actually saw Josie crossing the street and knowingly allowed her to do so. In our April 1st meeting with our IEP decision-making team, we had one teacher tell us that she saw Josie was leaving and told her it was a bad idea, and Josie left anyway. In an April 8th email to Mr. Autry contained in this packet, a teacher wrote, "During car duty, I saw Josie walk out of the building with her backpack. I had not called her name yet, signaling that her ride was there, and asked her what she was doing. She replied that she was supposed to walk to the Boys and Girls Club that afternoon. I saw her head to the crosswalk, and a few minutes later, she crossed the street." Again, this is a document that Mr. Martin had, but he wrote in his decision that nobody saw her leave. In another email, also included in this packet, a teacher wrote to Mr. Autry that said, "On the day in question, I arrived onto the side patio just as we were beginning to call car riders. The walkers were still leaving out the side door, and at this time, I noticed JP leaving. I stopped her," is that our 10-minute?
That's the 10 minutes.
Thank you. "I stopped her to ask where she was going. I know that she's normally picked up and asked if someone was coming for her, and she said yes, so I told her she needed to wait. At this time, another student stopped me to ask a question. I turned to answer their question, and when I turned back, JP was gone. I assumed JP had gone back into the school to wait. When her name was called, she did not come out." So this teacher lost track of her. And in the level 2 decision, Mr. Martin deemed the ratio of teachers supervising students at that time, quote, "appropriate and reasonable." But in this instance, a 2 teacher to 1 student ratio proved ineffective and unsafe, and it was misdocumented in that level 2 decision.
Just in the sake of expediency, let me address the last issue as briefly as I can, which is the lack of procedural fairness and due process. We did not receive a level 1 hearing. My understanding is that Mr. Autry considered the meeting that he and I had on the day following the incident to be that hearing. Unfortunately, you cannot have a hearing before a complaint is filed. And our complaint wasn't filed until April 1st. And so you cannot cure through a meeting that takes place before a grievance is filed, that grievance. And so for that reason, we believe that everything that's occurred after that is pretty much nullified by the fact that we never had that opportunity to be heard, notice and an opportunity to be heard. And in fact, we did not receive any sort of a hearing until about 3 months following the date of our filed grievance. And so we're concerned about that. There's also a line within the level 2 decision that I find to be pretty puzzling, which is that, and this is actually what it says. It says that any complaint, I'm actually looking for the actual line. It essentially said that we should have cured the fact that we didn't receive a level 1 hearing in the level 1 hearing. And that's a kind of circular reasoning I can't understand. But that's a nearly direct quote from the findings.
In my meeting with Mr. Martin, I said I did not have a level 1 decision, and he was not able to provide me with a copy of one, although he referenced it in his level 2 decision. Again, many of those things that he said were undocumented, and whether or not you consider to choose that issue about the loss of instructional time, I hope you understand that kids are getting out of Mike Moses outside of the bell schedule, and parents don't know it. That's a lot of time when kids can get into trouble, and parents can't cover that gap in care for their kids if they don't know their kids are free to go. We have a reasonable expectation that a school has a reasonable duty of care to keep kids safe, particularly if the school requests parents to submit in writing a designated chain of custodial care for a child. If that's not the case, it should be stated explicitly in district policy. We've shown you how one child fell through this communication and procedural gap. Please help prevent it from occurring again.
In conclusion, we believe that that the school has both a duty of care and a duty to care. And we hope that you'll correct this through policy for future kids. And we, again, appreciate your consideration of our request.
Thank you. Is the administration ready to proceed?
Yes, sir, we are.
You may proceed, Mr. Morton, and I recommend that you have a maximum of 10 minutes to address the complaint at this time. And Mrs. Anderson will revise when the time has expired.
Good evening, board members. My name is Michael Martin. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for the Nacogdoches Independent School District. I sat as the Level 2 hearing officer in Mrs. Peck's grievance appeal. We met July 1st here at the District Support Center. My Level 2 decision is within the record, beginning on page 43. My role as the Level 2 hearing officer was to consider the decision made by Mr. Autry at the Level 1 and determine if his review of the events of March 26 was consistent with policy and law. In essence, he was asked to review the Mike Moses Middle School processes and procedures concerning dismissal of students and determine if a gap occurred on March 26, resulting in the ability of Josie, a car rider, to walk across the street to the Boys and Girls Club undetected. Mr. Autry found that Josie went on her own accord, despite rules and instructions of staff to the contrary. After meeting with Mrs. Peck, of particular importance to my review was a better understanding of the dismissal procedures and the language within parent communication, as well as review of Josie's 504 plan. Regarding the dismissal process, I determined that Mr. Autry and his staff provide significant oversight of students. I reviewed a map of duty stations and considered roles and responsibilities of staff during dismissal times, as well as transition of students between classes and the parking lot to ensure safety. I found no deviation from these procedures on the part of staff, resulting in Josie having walked to the Boys and Girls Club on March 26th. Rather, I found that all procedures were followed, yet Josie elected to defy direction from staff. The only paperwork existing between the district and the parent concerning transportation is found on page 19, where the parent merely checks bus, daycare, or car under the heading transportation. This form is completed at the initiation of the school year or at the time of enrollment. The student handbook requires parent permission for a student to leave campus during the school day. You'll find this handbook text on page 41. But in this instance, Josie left after the school day and against the express direction of multiple teachers. Josie lied to Mrs. Lumpkins and ignored the directive of Mrs. Ridings to return to the car rider line. Teacher statements can be found on pages 15 through 17. Josie's 504 plan did not require any deviation from district procedures. Specifically, I found no indication that Josie required more stringent monitoring or any accommodation to prevent the events of March 26th. Josie is expected to follow campus directives, including those pertaining to transportation, and as Mr. Autry will attest, she has done so successfully for the prior 2 years. As such, I found that the standard of care provided by Mike Moses Middle School to be consistent with law and policy, and denied Mrs. Peck's request for written notification to parents of the contrary. I will allow Mr. Autry to address the board this time.
Thank you. Mr. Aubrey? Yes, sir.
Can you hear me from here?
Use the microphone.
So the very first thing I want to make very clear is that Mike Moses' priority is the well-being and the safety of all the students. We have a very caring staff. They go above and beyond to see that each and every day that the students are taken care of. And that begins every single morning when administrators arrive between 7:15 and 7:30. Now, they're not on duty until 8 o'clock, but we have parents dropping off students by 7:15, 7:30. We want to make sure that they're not outside by themselves, so we have staff there. We have 650 students arriving and departing each day, essentially at the same time. We utilize 27 to 30 staff members to assist in that transition in and out of the school. Now, typically we use more than that, but those are the ones that are specifically assigned. So I want to address the dismissal procedures so that you can understand. So a map is provided for you on page 18, and we'll have it projected up here, and then we'll walk through that process. So the procedure for dismissal is basically 3 steps. And the reason we have 3 steps is so that all 650 students are not moving at the same time. We even have a staggered bell schedule so that those 650 students are not moving at the same time. It's all about safety. So 4 to 5 minutes before the end of the school day, we dismiss band students. The reason that we do that is because we have around 200 band students that need to make their way to the band hall and pick up their instruments. Now, it's a small band hall, so they have to wait in line sometimes to get their instruments, so they need time to do that. We have monitors in place at that time. We have coaches outside because they're not in an intervention, and we also have the band halls, the band. So they're monitoring right here as all of these students are coming down. So the teachers are at their door, so they see them. So whichever way they go, they're monitored. So they come down, they get their instrument, and by the time they get their instrument, they're headed to their designated location, whether it be to the walking area, whether it be to car rider, or whether it be to buses. So then after that, as we're going, they're down, they're moving, and then 3 to 4 minutes before the bell, we have the walkers and the car riders. So again, the walkers leave class, they come down the hallway, they're monitored by everyone, and then we have specific locations for everyone else. They come down, if they're a walker, they go down this hallway right here between the kitchen and the cafeteria, they get on the sidewalk, and they head across to the Boys and Girls Club. We have there's basically 7 people in 30 yards monitoring them. We have 3 at the crosswalk. Some will go across the street one way, some go across the street the other way. If they are a car rider, now car riders come and they come into the cafeteria and they are seated. The reason we want them seated is so that we can call their names. So their job is to come into the cafeteria and sit. We have 3 people on the outside. 1 person is to monitor the porch area. The porch area is where the students' names are called. They're coming out to the porch. The other 2 individuals that are there, one of them is on a microphone and they call the student's name. The other individual, they're on cell phones because our walkie-talkies don't go very far. So they call each other on their cell phones and the parent will tell us who their student is, and then we make the call for them to come out to the porch. So once the cars come up, 3 wide, then those students will walk and they'll monitor them walking across to get onto the cars. So there's 2 lanes of cars that are coming. When the walkers, the monitors walkers, when those walkers are gone, all of the monitors for the walkers come back and they help with car duty as well. Okay. And then at the bell, we already have everybody stationed, but at the bell, it becomes our bus riders. So the bus riders are followed by the teachers. The teachers will escort all students out this door, release them to all of the staff that is out here, which is usually the APs, Officer RAM, coaches, and other teachers. Some of the teachers will stay and chat about their day and talk to kids. If not, their duty free is that day, they go back to their classrooms. Okay. You know, the procedures work well. We don't have questions by parents. The students understand the rules. The students, they understand the rules, but that particular day, Josie just chose to not follow that directive. There is no one-on-one in Josie's 504 plan, but I want to say this. Josie is a good kid. She's been with us for 2 years, and she's a sweet kid. On that particular day, like sometimes middle school kids do, she didn't follow the directions, and she knows the rules.
Ms. Anderson, do we have any time?
No, the Pecks have 1 minute and 53 seconds left.
Thank you. I'm going to try to go fast because I've got a short amount of time, but I don't want to lose you. I want to first address what Mr. Martin said and what Mr. Autry said about Josie not following the rules. On page 39, you have documentation from Josie's 504 plan, which says that Josie is oppositional and defiant. This is something documented of our child, and it's an expectation that we have that Mike Moses Middle School staff will adhere to this 504 plan and be able to manage a child who defies their authority. Secondly, she was released before campus concluded, before school concluded. On page 14, Mr. Autry tells you she was released at 3:46. He said car riders and walkers are released 3 or 4 minutes early. In his letter, he said 4 minutes early. By 4 minutes, Josie was already on the patio where she was supposed to be supervised as a walker, had she been a walker. And that's in the email on page 16 where it says Josie was leaving when the teacher arrived for outside duty on the patio. She got past the system. She's an oppositional and defiant child. She's a sweet and wonderful child, but this is documented. Further, on page 39, also in her 504 plan, it's recommended that Josie has a buddy system for transitions in the hallway if problems arise during transitions. We've had transition issues for 2 years for Josie. Hopefully, if that was an issue that they considered, they would have covered it per her 504 plan. Also on page 19 in that elected paperwork, it says explicitly, the following people have permission to pick up our child. It doesn't say our child can just set off on foot wherever she wants to. We are lucky that right now, in this case, she only went to the Boys and Girls Club, and we found her within a half an hour of her going missing. She's been invited off campus to do a lot of terrible things that she hasn't done, and in 4 minutes, she can get off campus if she's being released, and nobody's monitoring her, and nobody can control the behavior of, at this time, a 12-year-old girl. Thank you.
Thank you. Any time left for administration?
There's 4 minutes and 50 seconds.
The students are monitored. They're monitored the whole time when we start dismissal. They're monitored from that time until they leave. She just chose not to follow that. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I will now ask the board members if there are any questions responsive to the arguments presented by the parties or the documents in the record. I remind you that you must ask questions for clarification purposes only, and that your questions not exceed the boundaries of the record. Because we're tape recording this hearing, please identify yourself before speaking. Are there any questions of the board?
Mr. President, if I may, this is Pam Fitch. I believe I have a timeline question. And can I direct it to Mr. Autry or, okay. From what I'm piecing together here in the packet, it appears that the event took place on March the 26th.
Correct.
It appears that on March the 27th, I see a initial response and effort to remedy the situation. Is that correct?
Correct. On March the 27th, Mr. Peck, well, when I came in that morning is when I saw the email. And that's when I panicked because
Yeah.
the email said a teacher gave her permission to leave campus. And I'm like, oh my God, who would have given her permission to leave campus? During the day, I was like, oh my gosh. So I met with Dr. Peck, and we went through the whole thing, and I had barely had the basics of what had happened, so we talked about that. And then we talked about, okay, well, let's come up with a plan, and we figure out what a plan was. So we took one of our paraprofessionals, and we had them come in later and leave later, so that we could monitor her. So we moved her into an intervention period where that preparer was, and then Monday through Thursday, we would walk her to our champion zone, which is our tutorials. And then he would stay with her until 4:25 up in the office if they didn't have anything. And then he would escort her outside and wait outside after 4:25 if the babysitter had not shown up by that time. On Fridays, it was different because we don't have tutorials, so he would escort her straight to the office.
And then if I'm reading the paperwork correctly, so that was the communication. I'm kind of trying to put the timeline together. On the 27th, looked like there were a few more emails on the 28th. And then the level 1 was filed on April the 1st.
And that we had a discussion at the 504 meeting, because April the 1st is when we held the 504 meeting. The reason that we held the 504 meeting, we wanted to, the PECs wanted us to add it into about our plan, but I wanted to meet to make sure that everybody was on the same page.
Can we clarify the timeline? The grievance was presented at the conclusion of the 504 meeting, so also that could not be considered a hearing for a level 1 complaint either.
Okay. So March the 26th was a Tuesday, Wednesday, and then April the 1st was a Monday. All right.
Board? I will now declare Level 3 grievance hearing concluded. The board will recess into closed session with attorney, pursuant to section 551.071 to consult with counsel and section 551.0821 for deliberation. We'll now recess to closed session. It is now 6:22 p.m., and the board has reconvened into open session. The board did not take any vote or any action in the closed meeting. The board has concluded its hearing. Do I hear a motion regarding the disposition of the level 3 parent grievance?
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I make the motion that the board would uphold the administration's decision.
Do I hear a second?
I say.
Second. We have a motion from the board to uphold the administration decision. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. All opposed? The motion passed 6-1. Dr. Groma abstained? Correct. Okay. For the record to show, the motion passed 6-1. And in favor?
6-0.
6-0.
6-0. 1.
601. Okay, thank you all, helping me out there. 601. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Peg, and thank you, administration. This complaint proceeding board of trustees is not concluded. We will now proceed with the public hearing regarding the 2019-20 proposed tax rate.
You got to,
Okay, we get, okay, I'll come back to that.
You better pray first. When Ms. Barber starts talking, better pray for it first.
Okay. Thank you, board. During the summer months, trustees will be given the invocation and leading our pledges. I will call on Pastor James Irvin to give us the invocation. Thank you, sir.
may we pray. Father, we're so thankful for the blessings of this day. We thank you for this opportunity to come and to make decisions that would bless and lift our school district and our students. As we go throughout this meeting, we pray that you would guide us and order our steps, that we will make the right decisions. Then we just ask you to be with us in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you. If you would stand, Mr. Merman, Coach will release the pledges to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor to Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And Ms. Bobbick, I'm going to come back to you at this time, if you would, for the 2019 tax rate hearing. Thank you, Ms. Bobbick.
Good evening, President Neal, board members, Interim Superintendent Fraley. Tonight, we will be having the public hearing on the adoption of the tax rate. So before we get to that, I would like to review our general fund adopted budget. We have revenues of $59.4 million and expenditures of $59.4 million for a balanced budget with an estimated ending fund balance of $25.7 million. This was built on a projected ADA of 5,709 students. The proposed tax rate is decreasing from $1.17 for the M&O to 1.06835. When you adopted the budget, the proposed tax rate that was mentioned was 1.0684 at the direction of TEA at the time telling us to round. Now they're telling us that we must stipulate that we have to carry it out. This is a lower tax rate than what was initially stated. Debt service revenues are projected to be at $3.5 million, expenditures at $6.4 million, with a decrease in our fund balance of $2.9 million. This is planned decrease. We bought off the first interest payments from the sale of the bonds, and that has allowed us to not raise our debt service tax rate immediately. So that tax rate will remain the same at 0.1625. And that concludes the public meeting.
This is an opportunity to hear from comments from the audience. Comments at that time must pertain to the tax rate presentation. Do we have anyone comments from the audience? Thank you. Board will proceed, and next on our agenda for the interim superintendent, Mr. Fraley, brings information items.
Thank you, President Neal and trustees. Very pleased to announce we had our convocation this past Tuesday. You all were there. We had a great turnout.
Yes, sir.
And a great experience, I think, with the staff. Very highly spirited. Really appreciate the work of our communications department. Mr. Lamborg and his team did an outstanding job of organizing things, and all the vendors who support the vendor fair. We had, I believe, 17 last year and 35 this year when we had to say no more. More room in the end. Just really appreciate the community's support of our school system. Really appreciate that very much. And the Golden Dragon Marching Band got things kicked off. We had our choir there as well, and cheerleaders, and lots of door prizes were given out. All leading up to Monday, August 26th, when the school year begins officially with classes, we should say. And so my team and I will be out and about all morning long visiting with the schools, and then we'll get together late that morning and early afternoon to kind of compare notes and see what's going on, but we need to make any adjustments, because there's always adjustments. So we'll do that. And TxDOT is expecting, and I need to say they're expecting, to have the intersection of Fragay and Austin opened up through traffic by the beginning of school. We will hold our fingers and hope and pray. Tomorrow morning, we're going to have our second first responders breakfast, where it'll be our police department in NISD, the city, the sheriff, and a lot of other emergency crews from around the area, including, I see Cushing is on the list coming. Cushing ISD has police coming. At the university, we'll have folks there as well, and our county judge, and we'll have our city and county attorneys, just a number of folks who we worked with in some shape, form, or fashion throughout the school year to build a positive relationship in times before a crisis. So we're excited about that. I want to congratulate Dr. Terrell Groman. He's been named to the 2020 Leadership TASB class by the Texas Association of School Boards, so he'll be joining 35 other trustees from around the state. There are only 36 total from around the state of Texas that are being designated to be part of this cohort, which will involve a lot of learning. But it's also an honor for us, I think, to have someone from our district who chose me part of this. Dr. Groman, congratulations and thank you. And TE ratings have come out. We received a C this year like last year. However, our skill score from last year was 71. This year it's 79. So we have seen an 8-point increase in the skill score. It's not where we want it to be, but I know how much work takes place to get those 8 points. It's not easy. And I want to thank the staff for their focus in getting the job done, and all the teachers and the kids for working hard. And we'll do better, but we won't stop until we're the best. That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fraley. And again, we certainly want to thank our community for that great support, of all the many gifts at the convocation, great support in starting our, kicking our school year off. Thank you, community. And also, Dr. Groman will keep us informed as he proceeds with the Legislative Institute. So thank you for representing us, Dr. Groman. We will now hear public comments. Individuals wishing to speak must complete the form located on the table by the entrance door and turn it in prior to the meeting. Are there? We have none at this time. Board will move to consent agenda. Unless removed from the consent agenda, all items listed will be acted on with one motion. If there is a board member who wishes to discuss an item on the consent agenda separately, please indicate the agenda letter. It will be set aside for further discussion and separate vote. Board, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I move the board approve the consent agenda.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion second to approve of the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The consent agenda approved, unanimous decision. Thank you, board. Discussion and action agenda. But nice discussion. Consideration of the 2019-2020 student code of conduct. Dr. Hill, we'll turn it over to you. Mr. Freeland, you want to start us?
Well, actually, Dr. Hill gets a reprieve tonight. I had to take this over. She's busy with getting school started, and this is a duty that we had contracted out before, but we don't have that resource now. And so after following a legislative session, there are a lot of things to look at.
Yes, sir.
And I needed her to focus on getting school opened. And so after being out last week with my son from one section of the city, I came back and she had done a lot of work, and I said, okay, that's enough. Let me have this. But I do want to thank her. She did just a tremendous amount of work. Really appreciate that. So you should have 2 hard copies along with what's in the board book. One is the current code, which is 2018 to 2019 school year. Then you have the proposed code. The only changes we have contemplated and put in here are those required by the recent legislature. And there are some pieces to look at. In your 1920 handbook, the new language is indicated in blue. But this is the actual language for the handbook. It's just the new things added are in blue. I will try and share with you a little bit about it. If you look at page 4, we had the threat assessment and safe supportive team. That is new from Senate Bill 11. And this is in the new edition. And basically, we have a campus behavior coordinator who work closely with the threat assessment safe and supportive school team. And just reiterates that district officials may conduct searches as appropriate. On page 5, it talks about security personnel. There are some, unless I'm misreading it, there are some major contradictions within the bill itself. Senate Bill 1707. It references CKE local, which is in contradiction to D-2 of the bill, where it says that the police shall assist administration in maintaining a high degree of discipline and safe atmosphere with conducive to learning. But D2 says that you may not use that personnel to enforce discipline, administrative duties, and whatnot. And so we've got to work through that. It talks under law enforcement duties shall be A, enforce regulations and procedures. D2 says they should not do that. Item B, officers are responsible for random patrol to maintain high visibility in all areas and safe regard and whatnot. Pretty much says they should not do that. Then it talks also, that particular bill. Yeah, there's another part there. So that's the safety and security personnel, all right? Page 6 talks about unauthorized persons being on the campus. That's new language. Page 10, it references folks under the influence of certain items. That's new language there. Page 13 in blue. This is where I almost jumped ahead. This is Senate Bill 712 and House Bill 3630, where it prohibits what they call adversive techniques, which includes electric shock or any device that immobilizes a student. So the new tasers we just bought, the law says we can't use them.
That was the one thing when I was glancing through this, I just looked at and went, wait a minute, how does this impact?
It got Chief Murray's attention, so she's talking with her colleagues around the state as to what we're going to do with this. It talks about you may not release a noxious, toxic, or unpleasant spray or mist. So no mace or pepper spray. It says you may not secure a student to a stationary object. So if you have a mass situation, you cannot secure the students to a fixed object. So while you're dealing with one and go to the next one, that one cannot be secured so they can go somewhere else. So we're going to have to deal with a lot of these things here. And it talks also on page 14 about timeout and not in isolating students. It pretty much removes that option from us as well. Page 15, this is just a clarification where transportation staff may no longer enforce discipline on the buses. It must be campus behavior coordinator person. All right? This is not new language, but it's just being kind of reiterated.
So what do they do?
Well, they have to contact the school somehow, even though it's after school. A lot of help that we may not have needed, all right? Page 18, added bullet number 5, which you'll see this in several places where it talks about the conservatorship of foster care. And you'll see bullet 6 in a couple of places as well where it talks about the student status as homeless. It talks on page 19 as well about coursework during suspension. We tend to do this, but it just kind of codifies that we shall ensure students receive access to coursework for foundation curriculum courses while the student is placed in school or out of school suspension. And will have an opportunity to complete, if they're in DAEP, before the beginning of the next school year, each course the student was enrolled in at the time of removal. So we'll have to really work hard on that, Brother Adams. Page 20, it added under disciplinary alternative education, DAEP, again, just bullets 6 about the homeless and whatnot. Page 23, in blue, it talks about length of placement. And the current language talks about a discipline matrix, and the new language doesn't have that. And that current language is on page 15 of the old document. There's not any kind of material difference there. I did not find that at all. All right. Page 26 talks about, well, let's stop page 24. First, it talks about appeals. It's the same intent, but they modified the language, and now they're adding a reference to FNG local, which was not in the previous code. But the intent in all that is still pretty, very, very consistent. Page 26, transition services. If a student is being returned from DAEP or wherever, you should provide a transition process for that. And if we're not doing that now, we should be doing that right now, and we will be doing it certainly going forward. Page 27 it talks about racial sex offenders that in the past we must remove them and determine their placement. That we would do that, but now it says unless the court orders a JJEP placement. That language is added. Page 28 says placement review. The main difference here is once the review of a student's expulsion or placement, you must do this in intervals not to exceed 120 days. Previously, the teacher who removed the child from class had to give permission for the child to come back. That language has been removed. No longer requires consent of the teacher to remove the student in order for the student to be returned to class. Page 30 again has the numbers 5 and 6 about foster care and homelessness. Page 31, where it says within 300 feet of school, the last two bullets, one says possession of a firearm, and then the one in blue about possession of a legal knife. Those were just in one sentence before. Now they've been separated out. That's the only difference there. Page 32 says while in DAEP, in the previous handbook on page 23, it has items 1 through 9. This new language has 1 through 4, and then A through E are aligned with 4, which gives you the same total, the same 9 items. That these things should not happen while in DAEP. Below that says under federal law, there's some new language that says that you can't have these certain things in any setting that is under the district's control or supervision for the purpose of a school activity, and that a firearm is defined by federal law, and there's a glossary in the back of this handbook that defines what that is. And it references on the penal code, it references Penal Code 4602 about the unlawful carrying on or about the student's person, handguns, things like that. Page 34, you see the language again about homelessness and foster care. Again, Again, page 36 is about transition services again, which we do that. And I think that is it. Other than that, the only thing changed are those things in blue. Otherwise, the language is the same as it has been previously. And so we have set aside time to schedule a special meeting on Wednesday. If you need more time to review this, as we have been told, we need to have it adopted before the school year begins. So if you don't want to approve this tonight and take the chance to modify it if need be, then we'll have a special meeting on Wednesday. So it's just a pleasure of the board.
Yes, sir.
Mr. President, if I may.
Yes, please.
First, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Fraley and the staff for putting this together so we could kind of get a good snapshot of the changes and what we're dealing with. I know that was a short timeline, and thank you for getting it done.
Well, I got to thank Dr. Hill, Marjorie, and Mr. Martin, big time.
I appreciate it. I did have ample time to review it prior to the meeting today, so I feel good about that. The other thing I would like to request, I am deeply concerned about what I read on page 13 in regard to Senate Bill 12. So I'd like to request maybe at an upcoming meeting, we have an opportunity to visit our security protocols with Chief Murray and some legal review of what we're looking at there.
That is most certainly going to happen.
Thank you.
So you can either
Board,
approve this
at this
tonight or
time, either we can have a motion to consider approving the student code of conduct, or we can have a...
I'd like to make the motion that we approve the 2019-2020 student code of conduct as presented.
Thank you. Well, motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Minnie, second. Well, motion second. Any further discussion on student code of conduct? Board, all in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The student code of conduct has been approved unanimously.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
President. Thank you, Dr. Hill, Mr.
you,
Martin,
guys.
all the work involved. We're down to reports and summer school report with Mr. Charles and
Mr. Z.
Mr. Z is going to come present to us. Thank you, Mr. Z.
Let's see here. Good afternoon, President Neal, board members, and Interim Superintendent Fraley. Just so you know, I believe this PowerPoint should be found on page 584 in your binder. So today I'll be talking to you about our summer school program we offer here in Nacogdoches. And for those of you who are not familiar with summer learning, it's a lot like a MASH unit in the Army. We take teachers from across the district. We mobilize very quickly. We work with our wonderful services like food services and transportation to get our kids there and get them fed and get them home. We do what we do to our best of our ability, and then we get them home and bug out. So it's a pretty quick and interesting process, and you get to work with a lot of very, very fun people. So this is just a quick overview of the programs that we offer. We offer EIE, which is a local policy regarding academic achievement and retention and promotion. In our kindergarten through second grade, we had a focus on reading, literacy, and mathematics, whereas in third through eighth grade, we focused on reading, writing, and mathematics. We had our newcomers program, our migrant program, our Student Success Initiative, which is our SSI. It's state mandated, and it's where our students who need that third administration of the reading and math STAR test. And then we also have our ESL bilingual. Fredonia and Carpenter summer learning camps. We had our extended year services, which is available to special education students who exhibited or reasonably may be expected to exhibit severe or substantial regression that cannot be recouped within a reasonable period of time. Severe or substantial regression means that the student has been or will be unable to maintain one or more of those acquired critical skills in the absence of this extended year service. And then last but not least, we had at NHS, we had 3 programs. We had EOC remediation, credit recovery, and then original credit for government, economics, and PE. In elementary, and I have some of them here, Emily Long, if you don't mind standing up. This is Miss Long. She's one of our facilitators for our 5th grade SSI. So you see here, we had, thank you, Miss Long. She did a wonderful job. We had ESL bilingual newcomer with Heide Montero, who I believe was here as well. She offered a wonderful program. BQJ was packed with little children. We had an average daily attendance of 95 students in that program. EIE first through 5th grade, I ventured into the lower worlds and learned not to tie little children's shoes after they go to the restroom. It's an interesting trick that the teachers let me learn on my own. They all laugh. So look at him over there in that suit. Let's watch how long it takes him to freak out. And if you know me, I'm a germaphobe, so that was a wonderful learning experience I will never forget. We had an average daily attendance of 135 of those students. With 5th grade SSI with Ms. Long, as you just met, we had around an average daily attendance of 90 students. Ms. Myrna Flores from Carpenter had an average daily attendance of 72 at Carpenter's summer learning program. And Fredonia actually had 2 sessions. So for session 1 with Ms. Garcia, we had 45 students in our average daily attendance, and session 2 had an average daily attendance of 60 students. In our secondary summer learning program, Ms. Bankston, if you don't mind standing up, this is Ms. Bankston. She took on both EIE and SSI. For EIE, we had an average daily attendance of 60 students, and for SSI, we had an average of 83 students. Ms. Fuentes took the NHS. We had 126 students on our average daily attendance there, and our newcomer program had an average daily attendance of 30. So as you can tell, learning does not stop at the end of May in Nacogdoches. We most certainly carry on into the summer months. I really briefly wanted to go over the results with you of that third administration. SSI is a very important opportunity for us to try to close those gaps for students in their learning. We had 81 5th graders test in reading. We had 11 pass, which gives us a 14% passage rate. In math, we had 47 students take the test with 15% passing, which is 32%. And I do want to draw your attention to that 32%. Miss Long is she comes from a long line of math teachers. I learned that Miss Long at the high school, who's a math teacher, is her mom. And to put that in perspective, last year we had 44 testers in math with a 17% passing rate. So that math climbed significantly. In the bigger world of 8th grade, here we have 77 students testing and reading with 18 passing for 23%. We had 46 students in math with 11 students passing for 24%. And again, we're showing growth in continuing on with these awesome trends. The 8th grade program targeted specific skills, both the 8th and 5th grade, I apologize, that dealt really with our essential standards, which is, I know, an area that Dr. Hill has really hit heavy on. And so all around, we saw amazing gains with these kids. Do you have any questions about our summer learning?
I do.
Yes, sir.
My question would be the number of students that we serve in the summertime. The breakdown of the ethnic background, Hispanics, African Americans, Anglos. Do you have more Hispanic students attending summer school than you have from the other groups?
I do not have those numbers with me, and I'm a numbers person, so I don't like to speak without the numbers in front of me. But that is something that I would imagine that we can look into.
I'm just curious because it seemed like in the past when I was working for NISD, the majority of the kids that were in summer school were Hispanic children and like the migrant children and so. And so I'm wondering if they're catching up in being able to go to summer school. Is that helping them? Yes, it is?
I think my question, if I may, is going to kind of come right. It kind of interlaces with that very closely. And that is, I know one of the issues that we identified probably about this time last year was that we didn't have enough summer school spaces, and that there were children that needed that extra reading intervention that simply there wasn't enough space. So I know that was one of our goals, was to increase space in summer school. Did we do that?
Yes.
How's that looking? How many more students did we serve this year than last year? And do we need to continue to expand on that program?
Trying to think. The answer is yes. So in the past, we did SSI, the required. So SSI is always required for 5th and 8th grade math and reading. We did the newcomer. We did the ESL bilingual program, and we had the high school EOC credit accrual credit.
Recovery?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know it was another word, I just couldn't, it left me. So this year we added the policy EIE for promotion and retention.
Okay.
So if we were to go back to the slide that showed the specific ADA, the
Yes.
students that are there for EIE are the additional students that we were able to pick
So
up this
those,
summer.
that would hit that group of students who were potentially being retained.
Yes.
And that opened it up for them.
Yes, ma'am.
Basically is what you're saying.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect.
And those children are identified towards the end of the school year or throughout the school year? Are they monitored to know that they're going to have to go into summer school?
They're monitored throughout the school year, because if the promotion and retention EIE is based on a specific overall percentage in certain grade levels, for the lower levels, you look at their reading levels as well. So it's kind of twofold. So the answer is yes.
And we provide transportation for these students to ensure that
Yes,
they're
ma'am, we
able to
do.
participate.
Yes, ma'am, we
correct?
do.
So that's, the EIE is the new component, so that's excellent progress. I would like to express my appreciation to not only Mr. Z, but all of the teachers who gave up time this summer to teach our students. I know that's, everybody thinks teachers get the summer off, and that's a myth. You guys work very hard all year round, and would just like to reiterate my support for continuing to offer this resource as much as we possibly can to include as many students who need it to help our kids catch up.
And if I may, forgive me, there was one additional program that we did offer last year, forgive me. I believe we were limited, though, 6 students. I believe it was per campus. There was a cap on it,
Okay.
whereas this year there wasn't a cap. So I apologize for that
I have one more
oversight.
question. The teachers that are teaching summer school are those teachers that really have their heart in wanting to help kids, because I know it's difficult to give up their time. And so you have a consistency of teachers in summer school, is that correct?
Yes, sir. In my experience, you have the same faces every year.
Okay.
Thank you, Board. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr. Z. And to the staff and campus principals, thank you all for all your work, and the staff for a tremendous job in the summer making a difference for our kids. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Board, the next item on the agenda is a discussion item, is House Bill 2840, public comment and testimony at board meetings. So I'm asking our Superintendent, Mr. Fraley, if he will address that for us.
Thank you, President Neal. Trustees, a lot of things that we take for granted in NAC that doesn't happen around the state, and that's the chance for the public to participate in the deliberations of the board, to come and you have public comments. It's not required, it has not been required by law, but you've done that for years here, and a lot of places I've been done the same thing. But not everywhere does that. And so this law, House Bill 2840, does now require the board to have a public comment policy and practices, and that is to be effective September 1. And so you have to have a new procedure before you have the policy. So we've been reviewing TASB's work and recommendations from legal counsel as well, and there are some questions that we need to have you consider, and I'm happy to draft something for your consideration, but I want to get these questions in front of you, and so that when you see something that I present, you'll know why. We ask speakers to sign up, and you may still continue to do that, ask them to sign up. They must be given the chance to speak on any agenda item, which you've always allowed that as well. The difference is, do you allow that and the public comments? Now, a number of places are saying we're just going to do one because it was accomplishing the same thing, except now you'll keep the comments focused on the agenda and not just the random topics that come up, although you still are available via other communications to receive feedback and questions from the community. Just would not be during that time if that's your desire. In the city, what they do here is when an agenda item comes up, they open the floor up, or you can have folks come, the agenda's posted 72 hours, they can speak before the meeting. So do you want folks doing it throughout the meeting or up front? The difference is you cannot put a total time limit on public participation, as you currently can. However, you can put a limit on how long each person gets to talk. And so we have some recommendations that we can provide for that. Does the board desire to engage in back and forth dialogue? In the past, if it was not on the agenda, the board could not comment. And nothing requires you to engage in deliberations And so you need to think, do you want to do that, or do you want to just hear the public, and then, as elected officials, you deliberate amongst yourselves and with the administration or staff? Currently, we give 3 minutes per speaker, and you're allowed to provide a time limit as well. You can no longer have a block of time, a maximum of 30 minutes, but you can maybe have a sliding scale of, if you have X number of speakers, they get the full 3 minutes. If you have more than that, they get maybe 2 minutes or so. More than that, whatever, because you don't want to create the opportunity for the meetings to be hijacked, folks talking all night long, just to keep you from deliberating. But that's something for you to think about. So you have before you the actual language, House Bill 2840. You have language from TASB School Law Resource. And then you have just another little breakout of somebody else's interpretation of what you must consider, which pretty much is what I just said to you guys. And so what's your pleasure? Shall we develop something for you to look at and consider? It is not to be adopted in policy, but at the next meeting in September, you got to have this new procedure in place.
So at this point, TASB has not developed a recommended policy.
Correct. There'll be an update, I think, 114.
So we could start with some, well, the recommendations, administrative practices.
Correct.
To start, and then we'll work through the process to come up with policy.
Yes, sir.
Fairly, the audience can be involved, or time allowed for a spectator, or I say fans, discuss that. They can be during special meetings also.
Any meeting of the board now must allow
And
public
budget
comment.
process and.
Right. You know, we've talked about having some staff retreats just for planning purposes, and if the topic says planning, they can talk about planning. So I'm, again, willing to look at what's happening around us and draft some administrative recommendations as a start, and then we can allow the board time to reflect upon that, and what happens in September may not be the same thing you do in October, who knows?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think the only thing that you hit on that I feel strongly about, and it kind of interacts with our just previous discussion, is that we don't limit the public comment to only what's on the agenda. Because from time to time, we've had a public comment bring something to our attention that we weren't aware of. And availability of summer school last year was a prime example of that. Which I think has led to increased availability and participation in summer school. So I don't want to lose that ability for the public to bring something to our
Well,
attention.
this is one vehicle. The public has other vehicles to utilize as well, and it's about preserving your meeting. It's kind of what it is, but again, that is totally your call. It's your meeting. I just work for you.
One question I have is, on Mondays before the board meeting, we set aside to go over and discuss in detail, the agenda items so that we can move it to consent, so we can hear more reports and,
Right.
make good use of everybody's time, the public included. So if we continue, would we be able to continue with that? I mean, because technically then you've addressed it on Monday with the public, and continue with our consent agenda?
You may continue
As
the
we do?
consent agenda, but the public can, before the meeting, still speak
Speak
to
to
any
it
item at
before
the work study as well as the regular meeting.
Okay.
Again, it's a matter, do you want to do it throughout, sprinkle throughout the meeting, or do it all up front?
Up front.
Yes, sir. Recommend.
Okay, so I'll draft something, get it out to you guys ASAP.
Thank you.
And then I'll take your feedback from you.
Can you set a different policy for, say, workshops than regular meetings?
The law requires you to provide the public a chance to make comments on the agenda topic.
So I guess what you're saying is.
So on
Monday-
possibly on the workshops, we limit comment to the agenda items. But possibly if it's if it's the regular meeting, we allow public comment.
Yes,
I'm afraid
I
you're going to be
think the law
consistent,
says it
whatever you,
every
I
meeting.
think you're going to be consistent with whatever you
That's true,
decide.
that may be too confusing.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And again, what's important to note is I've dealt with a lot of issues that have not come before the board comment period. And the bulk of what we deal with does not come before the board comment period. And so that avenue will remain. It's about preserving your meeting, the integrity of your meeting. It's mainly what it's about. We've been very fortunate here. There are some places that don't do this at all. There are some places where the community deliberately is very monopolizes the time with things that don't help a single child learn how to read. It takes up a lot of time. So we'll offer some things, and then you tell me what you want, and we'll keep at it until you're happy with it.
Now, Mr. Freeman, my personal, just thinking of, you know, the agenda items. You know, sticking with the agenda items, those items that have been set aside. You know, if 5 people out here won't speak to all 12 agenda items.
And that could happen.
They can have that opportunity. So I think the agenda item.
Well, and the thing too is this is the Open Meetings Act and transparency.
Yes.
You have to post the agenda so the public knows what you're talking about. If you allow the random things, then the public may not know what's going on, and they may say, well, wait, I don't like that. And then you can get the back and forth. So, but anyway, you know, we'll draft something. I'll look at kind of what's happening around us. I talked to Ms. Korcheski on the way in here just now. She's been working with districts also. So we're going to see what the preponderance of other folks are doing and try to consolidate that into a recommendation as a start. And if it works out great, keep it going. If not, we'll do something different.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board, that's okay with you all. Well, that's Superintendent, this recommendation.
Thank you.
Any other items other than to adjourn? We have a motion?
I would like to move that we adjourn.
Yes, ma'am. We have a motion. We have a second? All in favor, stand by. All right. We're adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all.